later on, but let's come back to the UK first. And Charles, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about GB Energy. That must be going very well, surely.
Well, I think we can probably qualify that. Yes, we'll look at Great British Energy, and this is something UK columnists talked about even back at its inception last year, 2024. Spoiler alert, it is not great. It's not really particularly British, and there is going to be very little in the way of energy. But the reason it's in the news today is that there has been a report from the Institute for Public Policy Research, which relates back to the Labour Party manifesto of 2024. So right away, we are stuck in the zone of net zero being absolutely ideological rather more than anything else. And in the manifesto, they said that they were going to turn the page decisively on the Conservative ideas that have caused chaos in order that they can take ownership of the chaos themselves. The proposal is that this is pushed on by £8.3 billion worth of investment, which can only be said to secure perhaps 5% of the total energy requirement following the year 2030. So that's an absolutely paltry amount of electricity to be generating. At 1 minute past midnight this morning, they were meant to publish the full report, but like all things connected to net zero, that didn't work. And we'll then take a look at the chief executive just to see the sorts of alignments we're considering here, run by a chap called Jürgen Meyer, who is also running the digital Catapult here, accelerating the digital future. And of course, because we know now from the National Energy System Operator that all energy is really to be diverted towards artificial intelligence and control of our lives in order that we surrender our own requirement for energy. This is entirely in keeping with the direction of travel. Now, this, of course, provides an opportunity for political opportunism, and this is where the leader of the opposition has jumped in, receiving a certain amount of criticism, but of course, it's all very theatrical. Kemi Badenoch here taking flack for saying that we're now going to be dependent upon China, which has instantly meant that she's been fact-checked by Carbon Brief. Now, the moment you start telling lies about this sort of stuff, you are definitely going to get caught out. So the irony being that last year, the IPPR produced a paper written by the same man who's produced today's report, Simon Gasperin, produced a document called Second Wind, in which they said, to meet global net zero 2030 targets, the world's wind manufacturing annual capacity will have to increase to 350 gigawatts, which is a significant increase on where we are now. I know these figures are slightly meaningless, but the point is, it needs to be ramped up dramatically. And the report went on to say that China is the global wind superpower. China accounts for 3/5 of the world's capacity in wind nacelles and blades, and accounts for the overwhelming majority of mining and refining of essential rare earth minerals. So Badenoch might be right, but of course, is China a threat or not? And is one to take the Richard Dearlove line or not? So this absurd line being walked when it concerns net zero, which, as I say, of course, is an ideological commitment rather than anything else. Now, what I'll do is I'll just set in context what this means in terms of energy. This is taken from Energy Dashboard Live at 6 o'clock this morning. The overall picture of energy on the left there. Now, I'm putting a red arrow down onto the renewable contribution, which was only just over 9% this morning because the sun hadn't yet got up and it wasn't really blowing much in the way of wind. What is worth drawing your attention to is the box just to its right, which I've ringed there in red, because that is the total contribution from imports and nuclear, which amounts to just over 8.5 gigawatts of energy, which is what Great British Energy is supposed to recover from an £8.3 billion investment. Now, is it worth it if the sun's not going to shine and the wind's not going to blow? I will leave you to answer that question yourself. And now on the right, we see what's called the carbon intensity. So even if all of this stuff works, and we do get, by some miracle, 5% of renewable energy, if you turn the gas on, then you're destroying your fiction of net zero, because, of course, you're straight into the zone of what they call high carbon intensity. Now, just to give an indication of the direction this dreadful scam is going, the Alpha Ventus offshore wind capability that Germany had set up 15 years ago is now going to be closed because it cannot be profitable because the subsidy has dried up, which just reinforces the point. This is absolutely a totally and utterly failed policy. And just to contextualize the requirements by space for all of these various technologies, we'll just look at the Nuclear Energy Institute, which shows here with a graphic which I'll describe the acreage taken up in order to produce 1,000,000 megawatt hours. Now, to produce 1,000,000 megawatt hours, nuclear would require 103 acres, solar would require 3,200 acres, and wind would require a whopping 17,800 acres. So we've talked a lot on this programme about the stealing of agricultural land in particular, but land that belongs really in the natural world being completely destroyed by this so-called renewable technology. Now, last week I spoke about a food and farming symposium that was going to take place in Cheltenham at the weekend, which it duly did, and it was a great success. Sandy was there too, and very pleasingly, this has been reported by the Stroud News and Journal, an article put in by Kay Devine, so we see this on screen. And it's worth noting that there were two members of Parliament there, one pictured here standing next to a UK column journalist, and here's Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, which of course is significant because he has recently audited the absurd carbon capture scheme and highlighted the incredible inefficiencies of that particular technology. But within the article, I'd just like to draw out the following text, which is how it concluded, which is that supranational and unaccountable influence over the food supply via the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and the Davos influence is something that those present expressed their determination to challenge and resist. So I think to have it on record that a sitting member of Parliament, and indeed one who chairs the Public Accounts Committee, was present at such an event is significant. It means that this is being heard, and it really cannot be hidden that this net zero agenda fails at every turn. It is absolutely becoming more and more of public concern. So of course now it's over to people to keep the pressure on, particularly where it concerns the utter waste of taxpayer money, as indeed we see with this absurd idea for Great British Energy.
Charles, thank you very much for that.